So we're going to move into After Effects, and before we do our compositing, I just want to show you what the final product is going to look like. So this is the image with the text, some blur, and it's definitely matching the original footage. You can see the reflections are pretty nice. They're a little flickery, and that was due to the global illumination settings that I used. I didn't switch it to animation mode, it was on still frame mode, and so that was really the issue with that. So I'll just play that one more time, and from here we will go into setting this up in After Effects. So pretty cool. Okay, I'll go ahead and close this. I'm going to say File, Import File. And you can see here we've got all of the passes saved out as individual JPEG sequences. So I'm just going to go ahead and start bringing those in. So my ambient occlusion, I'll go ahead and import multiple files here so I don't have to keep going to that. Ambient occlusion, scroll down to the next one. I don't want the global illumination pass, which is that one. I do want my object buffer pass, so I'll take that, open that in. Reflection pass, I definitely want to have. Open that. And shadow pass we don't need. The espresso pass is the text itself. And last but not least, we need our video, which is the 1080p kitchen movie. I don't know why it thinks there's an alpha channel embedded in my QuickTime movie, but I'm just going to ignore that. And I'm done importing. What I want to do is, all that really matters is that all of the frame rates are set the same. You'll notice right now if I go into Interpret Footage Main, this one is set to 23976. Okay, I'm going to copy that. And these are all going to be set to 30 frames per second. And that's just the way they come in standard. I'm going to go ahead and change that to that mode. And if I do that to all of these before I bring any of them into a composition, it will be applied to the composition itself, which is what we want. So I'm just going to go ahead and do this to all of the C4D footage that I brought in. Okay, so now all of my frame rates are the same. I can simply drag my kitchen video down, and this will be my starting point. Kitchen video. First thing I want to bring in on top of this is the reflections. So I'm going to find my reflection pass. There it is. Bring that reflection pass straight on top of this. Right now, because of the way I rendered this out, I didn't turn the reflections up really high the first time, so you really can't see anything in the footage, which is unfortunate. So the first thing I'm going to do is do a quick curves adjustment on this. So just go to my color correction, curves, and I know I just want to bring up this side, and I'll go ahead and get rid of that. Bring this one down. Okay, so you can see the curves are bringing that reflection in at the bottom of the scene now. So now when I go scrub through my image, I can actually see that reflection pass. And right now, of course, it's black, mostly with some white type. That looks pretty good. I'm going to put a little blur on this anyway, so it won't matter if it's just a touch grainy. So I want to set my reflection pass to add, and so that's what we'll get right off the bat. So you can see in the video now I have my reflections. They're matching with the tracking because it was rendered out that way. Okay, the second thing I want to bring in is the actual espresso text itself. And this particular image is a little dark. It came out a little darker than I wanted it to, and that's because I didn't because all of the things are applied to them as I said it in this scenario. So what I should have done is rendered out the text without all of these things and turned off the reflections and all of that, and just rendered out simply the text with shadows, and placed all of these things back on in After Effects. So this is sort of a layer that's got the global illumination and everything applied to it already. But I'll go ahead and use that. And what I'm going to do is bring my object buffer in here. And I'm going to use my object buffer for two different reasons. I'm going to put it, first of all, on screen, so I'm lightening up the thing behind it. And then I'm going to turn the opacity down. So that it's just, I'm keeping a lot of the work that I've done in that text, but I'm just brightening it up and brightening it up a little bit. And then to mask off my my movie with that object buffer, I simply have to say Effect, Channel, Set Matte. I'm going to choose the Espresso object buffer for that matte, and I'm going to use the luminance channel to do that. So now it's this Espresso object 2 is simply a white layer. It's doing two things right now. It's acting as a matte for my original layer, so it's cutting it out so it looks like this, but I thought that was too dark, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this on still, and I can play around with the opacity level of that layer, as long as it's set to screen, to get things looking the way I want them to look. Okay, and the last thing I'm going to bring in, you can see right now it doesn't really feel believable that it's sitting on this surface. You don't see any shadow whatsoever, so I'm going to go ahead and bring in that ambient occlusion pass. And with that pass, I want to set this to multiply, and I probably want to turn it down just a tad. Something like so. So I'm getting a little bit of that shadow, I'm getting a little reflection. I think I want to increase the opacity of this a little. It's a little brighter text. Yeah, that's looking better for me. Okay, so I've gotten this to the level that I'm happy with it. If I scrub through this and I rendered it, you'd see that everything's lining up correctly. But the thing that's off is you see how sharp this text is versus how blurry the image is. So I didn't do a great job focusing on my objects, so we're walking into the kitchen. As we're approaching the espresso machine, things feel a little blurry, out of focus, and the closer we get to the espresso machine, the more sharp and crisp things get, even though they really never reach a full sharpness. Okay, so what we're going to talk about now is cleaning up this image to try to match your video. One thing I see off the bat that I want to do is come in here and work on this actual image. So I'm looking at the text itself. I want to look at the color correction and just do a hue and saturation adjustment on there. I'm just going to turn saturation way up so I can see the color well. So the yellow color in it's actually probably pretty good. Maybe I'll make it a little bit more orange. And I want to lighten that whole thing up just a little bit too. And I'm going to turn my saturation back down to where it was. Maybe up it a little bit. Turn these other views back on. Just to add a little bit more yellow into that image. I thought that it was a little too popping out too much. So darken it up a little more. That looks pretty good to me. I think it feels a little more believable that it's sitting in that scene. Got reflections. So one thing I want to do before I start messing around with blur and everything for everything else is to blur those reflections. You see how sharp the reflections look? It's just not looking good to me. So I'm going to add a quick directional blur on my shadow. Straight up direction looks pretty good. It might want to be just a little bit this way, looking at the other reflections in the image. And I'm going to blur that pretty well. Give it a nice softness so it feels more believable, like it's really in that image now. So now the reflections are going the same direction as other reflections in the screen, and they feel a little softer, or you're picking up some of that texture in the ground plane. So that's what I was wanting to do. From here, what I want to do is make a pre-comp of my text layer. So I'm going to actually select just these text objects and say layer pre-compose. And we'll call that pre-comp 1, that's fine. Perhaps that is not what I wanted to do. Okay. I think I want to make a pre-compose of all of these. And then look at my kitchen composition. Yeah, that's what I want to do. Okay. So now what I'm going to do is sort of try to match the text blur to that. So I've got my pre-comp 1 contains all the work I just did. The kitchen composition now only has pre-comp 1 in it. And now I can apply effects to the entire thing at once. So what I'm going to do now is my motion blur and just a standard blur to get things to look correct, so the text doesn't look so sharp. So I'm going to just do I think a box blur would be fine. And give that a... Okay, I'm not liking the box blur. I'm going to do a Gaussian blur. Blur shopping, Gaussian blur. There we go. So at the beginning of this, I want the blur to be pretty heavy so that it's working with that screen in the background, or working with the image in the background. And as we get closer, I'll sharpen this up a little bit. So that looks pretty nice. You know, it's all fuzzy. And we're going to move in a little bit closer, so I'm going to just go from like the farthest back point, which is about right here, to the closest point, which is around here. And there I'm going to turn this blur down to like 1.5. So it's a little more believable. I forgot to put a keyframe. I'll go ahead and frame that. Keyframe that, go back to here. I think I had it set to 4. Okay, so now I've got it keyframed at 4 there, zooming in, it's getting a little less blurry, sharpening up a little bit so that when we're in this area, it's pretty sharp. The last thing I want to do is put an effect on here for motion blur. I like to use revision plugins, Real Smart Motion Blur. There are others out there available. This one's really nice. You simply turn this on, 0.75. And now in these frames where things are really moving, you're going to see that it's automatically generating a motion blur that matches the screen behind it, which is pretty cool. Okay, so from here we simply render, and after rendering out once more, this is what you should get. So I hope you've enjoyed this and got something out of it. If you have questions, let me know, and that'll be the end of this tutorial.